When I returned from my business trip, I discovered my daughter-in-law had remodeled my entire house. My parents will live here with you now, Victoria announced with that sweet smile that never reached her eyes. Easier to have all the dead weight under one roof. 1 hour later she was panicking. Why are the police here looking for me? You're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. But let me backtrack and tell you how a perfectly ordinary Tuesday turned into the most satisfying day of my 64 years. I'm Ava Henderson, and I thought I knew my daughter-in-law. I thought I understood the delicate balance we'd maintained since my son Daniel married Victoria 8 years ago. I thought wrong about everything. The business trip to Portland had been routine, checking on our construction sites, meeting with suppliers, the usual responsibilities. That came with running Henderson Construction since my husband Robert's death 3 years ago. Daniel managed the day-to-day operations now. But I still handled the major accounts and financial oversight, or so I believed. The flight home was delayed, which meant I arrived at my house, the house Robert and I had built 30 years ago, at nearly 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. The porch light was off, which was odd. Victoria always left it on when I traveled. I fumbled with my keys in the darkness. And when I finally got the door open, I stood there staring. My living room had been completely transformed. The warm burgundy walls Robert had painted by hand were now stark white. Grandmother's antique furniture had vanished, replaced by sleek, modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a doctor's waiting room. Surprise! Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs. Her blonde hair perfectly styled. Despite the late hour. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of updating a few things while you were away. Set my suitcase down slowly, trying to process what I was seeing. Where is my furniture, Victoria? Oh, that old stuff. I donated it. Such a relief to get rid of all those dusty antiques. She descended the stairs with theatrical grace, clearly pleased with herself. The house feels so much more contemporary now, don't you think? My grandmother's rocking chair, Robert's favorite reading chair, the coffee table where we'd played countless games with the children. All gone. You had no right. Actually, I did. Victoria's smile. Arpin. Daniel signed the paperwork months ago. As his wife, I have legal authority to make household decisions. Besides, you'll need to get used to sharing the space. That's when she dropped the bomb about her parents moving in. Her parents, who had never worked a day in their lives and lived off government assistance and Victoria's increasingly expensive gifts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand explanations. But something in Victoria's expression warned me to tread carefully. This wasn't spontaneous redecorating. This was calculated, planned, deliberate. Where exactly do you propose everyone will sleep? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Well, naturally you'll move to the guest room. Mother and Daddy will take the master suite. They need the space for all their medical equipment. Victoria examined her manicured nails. Don't worry, I've already moved your things. The guest room in my own house, the house my husband built with his own hands. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Because 3 weeks earlier I had discovered something about Victoria that changed everything. Something that made this little power play seem almost quaint by comparison. You see, my daughter-in-law wasn't just rearranging furniture. She was stealing from us. Systematically, cleverly, and in amounts that would destroy our family business if discovered. And I had been keeping her secret. 3 weeks earlier, I had been working late in the office, trying to reconcile some discrepancies in our quarterly reports. Henderson Construction had been my life's work alongside Robert, and after his death, maintaining its success felt like honoring his memory. The numbers weren't adding up. Small amounts at first. Few. 100 here, 1,000 there. But as I dug deeper, a pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. Victoria had access to our accounts as Daniel's wife and the company's administrative coordinator. What I discovered that night, cross-referencing invoices with bank statements by the light of my desk lamp, was a masterpiece of embezzlement. Fictitious vendor payments, inflated supply costs with the difference redirected to a separate account, even false employee bonuses that somehow never made it to the intended recipients. Over 18 months, Victoria had stolen nearly $200,000 from Henderson Construction. My first instinct was to call Daniel immediately, wake him up, drag him to the office, show him the evidence. But something stopped me. Daniel loved Victoria completely, blindly, devotedly. She had transformed my serious, workaholic son into a man who laughed easily, who took vacations, who seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Their children, my grandchildren, Emma and Jake, adored their mother. If I exposed Victoria's theft, it wouldn't just destroy her. Would devastate Daniel, traumatize the children, and tear our family apart. Scandal would likely ruin our business reputation as well. So, I made a decision that I now realize was both noble and incredibly stupid. I would handle it quietly. I would confront Victoria privately, give her a chance to explain, maybe work out a repayment plan. We would keep it between us, protect the family, preserve everyone's dignity. I was so naive. The next morning I asked Victoria to meet me for coffee at Rosie's Diner, a little place downtown where we could talk without interruption. She arrived 20 minutes late, which should have been my first clue about how this conversation would go. Hurry, Ava. The children needed help with their school projects. She slid into the booth across from me, looking genuinely apologetic. What did you want to discuss? I had rehearsed this moment, choosing my words carefully. Victoria, I've been reviewing the company finances, and I've noticed some irregularities. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her grip tighten slightly on her coffee cup. Irregularities. Missing funds, payments to vendors that don't exist. It appears someone has been systematically stealing from the business. Now she looked confused, concerned even. That's terrible. Do you think it's someone at the bank or maybe one of the office staff? The performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed her. Victoria, I know it's you. The mask slipped for just a moment. In her eyes I saw acknowledgement, calculation, and something that looked almost like relief. Prove it, she said quietly. That's when I realized I had made a fundamental error. I had assumed Victoria would be ashamed when confronted, grateful for a chance to make things right. Instead, she was calling my bluff. I have the documentation that you'll never show. Daniel. Victoria leaned forward, her voice low but confident. 'Cause you love your son too much to break his heart. Because you know this would destroy our marriage and traumatize your grandchildren. Because you care more about keeping the family together than about money that's already gone. She was right. And we both knew it. Both. Here's what's going to happen, Victoria continued, stirring sugar into her coffee with casual precision. You're going to let this slide. You're going to mind your own business and stop poking around in financial records that, frankly, you're too old to properly understand anymore. Patronizing tone was like a slap, but she wasn't finished. In return, I'll be more careful going forward. Consider it a learning experience for both of us. I should have walked away then. Should have gone straight to the police to Daniel, to anyone who would listen. Instead, I found myself nodding. But Victoria smiled, the sweet expression returning to her face. I'm so glad we understand each other. Family harmony is so important, don't you think? As she left the diner, tossing a casual, "See you Sunday for dinner," over her shoulder, I realized I had just made the worst deal of my life. Because Victoria hadn't promised to stop stealing, she had promised to be more careful. And that distinction would prove to be everything. The changes started small, so subtle that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. Victoria began arriving late to our weekly Sunday dinners, offering elaborate apologies about traffic or the children's activities, but never quite managing to hide her satisfied smirk when she saw my frustrated expression. She would comment on my cooking with faint praise that somehow felt like criticism. "This roast is so traditional, Ava. Keep telling Daniel we should try more modern cuisine, but you know how he loves his comfort food." She started rearranging my kitchen every time she visited, claiming she was just trying to help when I couldn't find my own utensils. Favorite coffee mugs mysteriously disappeared, replaced by delicate china cups that felt foreign in my hands. "Thought we'd upgrade your kitchenware," she explained when I asked about my missing mugs. "These are so much more elegant for when you have company." The company, it turned out, was increasingly Victoria's friends and her parents, who had begun making regular appearances at my house for dinner parties I hadn't agreed to host. "You don't mind, do you, Ava? It's just that our place is so small and you have all this room." Victoria would appear at my door with a carload of guests, expecting me to provide food and entertainment. "I told everyone about your famous lasagna." Minded terribly, but Daniel seemed so pleased that Victoria was making an effort to include me in their social circle. How could I explain that every gathering felt like an invasion, that I was becoming a stranger in my own home? The worst part was how Victoria managed to position herself as the generous daughter-in-law, going out of her way to spend time with poor lonely Ava. She would loudly praise my contributions to the evening. "Ava made this dessert all by herself. Isn't she wonderful?" in a tone that made me feel like an elderly relative being humored rather than the homeowner hosting the party. But it was the incident with Emma's birthday party that showed me how completely Victoria had turned the tables. Emma was turning 10, and I had been planning her party for weeks. My granddaughter and I had chosen a fairy tale theme together, and I had spent days crafting handmade decorations and baking a 3-layer princess cake. The morning of the party, Victoria arrived early with her mother, Karen, and a carload of store-bought decorations. "Change of plans," Victoria announced, not even greeting me. We decided to go with a more modern theme, pink and gold, very Instagram-worthy. They proceeded to take down my handmade decorations, replacing them with generic balloons and banners that looked like they came from a warehouse store. When I protested, Victoria's voice turned sharp. "Ava, I appreciate your efforts, but Emma is my daughter. I think I know what she prefers." Emma stood in the doorway watching this exchange, her face fallen. She had been so excited about the fairy tale decorations we had made together. "But Grandma and I worked really hard on the fairies," Emma said in a small voice. "Oh, sweetheart." Victoria's tone instantly became sugary. "Grandma means well, but sometimes grown-ups have different ideas about what looks nice. Don't worry, this will be much prettier." The dismissal was complete. My granddaughter's disappointment, my hours of work, my role in her celebration, all swept aside, with casual cruelty. But the real blow came when the other parents arrived for the party. "Victoria, this looks amazing," one mother exclaimed. "You're so creative with parties." "Thank you. I stayed up all night putting this together." Victoria accepted the praise graciously, not mentioning my contributions at all. "Just want Emma to have the best." I watched from the kitchen as Victoria played the perfect hostess, serving the cake I had baked while accepting compliments for the party she had hijacked. The other parents praised her organization, her attention to detail, her dedication to making her daughter's day special. Not one person acknowledged that this was my house, my kitchen, my cake. That evening, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the remnants of the party I had been erased from, Daniel found me scraping frosting off plates. "Great party, Mom." Victoria really outdid herself. I looked at my son, this man I had raised to be honest and fair, and realized he genuinely didn't see what had happened. In his eyes, his wife had graciously organized a party in my home, and I had been lucky to help. "Daniel," I said carefully, "don't you think Victoria should have discussed the decoration changes with me first?" He looked puzzled. "Why? It's Emma's party. Victoria knows what she likes. But Emma and I had planned." "Mom, I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be." Daniel's voice held that patient tone people use with elderly relatives who don't quite understand modern ways. "Victoria was just trying to make everything perfect. You should be grateful she's willing to have the party here at all." "Grateful? I should be grateful that my daughter-in-law had allowed me to host my granddaughter's birthday party in my own home." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized Victoria's strategy was becoming clear. She wasn't just stealing money from the business. She was systematically stealing my place in the family. One small humiliation at a and she was doing it so skillfully that even my own son couldn't see it happening. Victoria's parents moved in on a Tuesday. I came home from grocery shopping to find a moving truck in my driveway and strangers carrying furniture into my house. Victoria met me at the door with that bright smile that had become my personal danger signal. "Surprise. I told you they were coming. Remember? I mentioned it last week." She hadn't mentioned anything and we both knew it. But Karen and Bob Mitchell were already settling into my master bedroom, admiring the view from my windows, discussing where to put their television. "It's temporary," Victoria assured me, though her parents were unpacking like they planned to stay forever, just until they get back on their feet. Bob Mitchell was 62 and hadn't held a job in 5 years. Karen claimed disability for a back injury that didn't prevent her from shopping or redecorating, but apparently made employment impossible. Together, they lived off government assistance and whatever money Victoria could funnel their way. Money that I now realized came directly from our company accounts. "They'll contribute to household expenses, of course," Victoria continued, though she didn't specify when or how. Within a week, my quiet home had become a chaotic boarding house. Karen rearranged my kitchen to suit her cooking preferences. Bob commandeered my living room television and filled the house with the constant noise of sports broadcasts and political talk shows. They ate my food, used my utilities, and treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. But the breaking point came during Emma's school play. Emma was performing in her 5th grade production of Little Red Riding Hood, and she had been practicing her lines for weeks. Had promised to be there, and Emma had saved me a seat in the front row next to Daniel and Victoria. 20 minutes before the play started, Victoria appeared at my bedroom door. I'm so sorry, Ava, but there's been a change of plans. Karen stood behind her, dressed in her finest outfit and clutching a bouquet of flowers. Mother decided she wants to see Emma perform, which is so sweet of her. Victoria continued. But there's only room for 3 adults in the front row, and since she is Emma's grandmother, the implication hung in the air. Karen was family. I was just someone who happened to live in the house. Emma saved me a seat, I said quietly. Oh, she'll understand. She's such a mature child. Victoria's tone was dismissive. Besides, you'll have other opportunities to see her perform. I watched through my bedroom window as they drove away in my son's car, leaving me behind like forgotten luggage. Emma would look out at the audience, expecting to see my face, and I wouldn't be there. But this time I didn't just sit quietly and accept the humiliation. I drove to the school alone, bought a ticket for the general admission section, and found a seat in the back of the auditorium. From there, I watched my granddaughter perform beautifully as Little Red Riding Hood, her voice clear and confident as she delivered her lines. After the play, Emma found me in the crowd of parents. "Grandma, you came." She hugged me tightly, still in her costume. "Did you see my part with the wolf? You were magnificent, sweetheart. The best Little Red Riding Hood I've ever seen. But why were you sitting back there? I saved you a seat in front." Before I could answer, Victoria appeared with Karen in tow. "There you are, Emma. Come take pictures with grandmother Karen." Victoria's voice was sharp. "She came all this way to see you perform." Emma looked confused, glancing between me and Karen. "But Grandma Ava is here too. Can she be in the pictures?" "Of course," Victoria said, with that fake smile. "Maybe Grandma Ava could take the pictures for us." And just like that, I was relegated from family to photographer, capturing moments I should have been part of, holding memories I was excluded from creating. That night, lying in the guest room that had become my permanent residence, I made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I was done protecting Victoria. The woman who had stolen from our business, invaded my home, and erased me from my own family, deserved whatever consequences were coming her way. The only question was how to deliver them in a way that would expose her true nature without destroying my son and grandchildren in the process. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep Victoria's deception went. Because if she was bold enough to steal my place in the family, I had a feeling the financial theft was far from over. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to the office during lunch when I knew Victoria would be at home. It was time to do some serious digging in our financial records. What I discovered made the initial theft look like pocket change. Victoria had been busier than I imagined, sitting alone in the office. That afternoon, surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements, I uncovered a web of financial fraud that took my breath away. The $200,000 I had initially discovered was just the beginning. She had created an entirely fictitious construction project, a luxury home renovation that existed only on paper, but generated very real invoices and payments. For 8 months, Henderson Construction had been paying for materials, labor, and permits for a house that didn't exist, sending checks to a shell company that led directly back to an account Victoria controlled. The sophistication of it was almost admirable. She had forged Daniel's signature on contracts, created false documentation that would fool any casual inspection, and even generated fake progress reports complete with photographs she had stolen from other construction projects online. Total amount was staggering: $437,000. But what made my hands shake as I Printed the evidence wasn't just the money. It was the timeline. Victoria's most brazen thefts had occurred in the past 3 months. The same period when she had escalated her campaign to push me out of my own home. She wasn't just getting bolder because she thought she could get away with it. She was stealing faster because she was planning something big, something that required a significant amount of cash and my complete absence from family financial decisions. I was studying a particularly damning series of forged invoices when I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart stopped. The office was supposed to be empty, but someone was walking toward the accounting department with purposeful steps. I quickly shoved the papers into a folder and slipped it under a stack of legitimate files just as Victoria appeared in the doorway. Ava, what a surprise. Her tone was light, but her eyes were calculating. Daniel said you were sick today. Just a headache. I thought some quiet time in the office might help. I tried to match her casual tone, though my pulse was racing. What brings you here? Oh, I forgot some files this morning. You know how scattered I get. She moved into the room with the confidence of someone who belonged there. But I noticed her gaze sweep across my desk, taking inventory of what I had been looking at. Feeling better. Hope. Victoria perched on the edge of Daniel's desk, making it clear that she considered herself more entitled to this space than I was. Much thank you. I stood to leave the folder containing her crimes tucked casually under my arm with other paperwork. I should head home and rest. Good idea. Mother is making her famous pot roast tonight. She's so excited to cook for the family. The casual mention of Mother making dinner in my kitchen with my groceries was another small knife thrust, but I just smiled and headed for the door. Eva. Victoria's voice stopped me. What were you working on? Maybe I can help finish it tomorrow. Just reconciling some vendor payments. Nothing urgent. Which vendors? Handle most of that paperwork now. The question was too pointed, too interested. Victoria suspected something. Various. I'll leave you a note if I need anything completed. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking. Victoria had caught me investigating her theft, and while I had managed to extract the evidence without being discovered, she knew something had shifted between us. That evening at dinner, I watched Victoria perform her role as the devoted daughter-in-law with new eyes. She complimented Karen's pot roast effusively, helped Jake with his homework, and chatted with Daniel about his day with the warm attention of a loving wife. But periodically her gaze would flick to me, and I saw something cold and calculating there. She was evaluating, planning, deciding how much of a threat I posed. After dinner, as I washed dishes that Karen had promised to clean, but somehow never got around to, Victoria appeared beside me with a dish towel. Let me help, she said, taking a plate from my hands. You look tired. We worked in silence for a moment. The kitchen filled with the sounds of Bob's television and the children's laughter from the living room. You know, Ava, Victoria said suddenly, I've been thinking about what you said a few weeks ago about the business finances. My hands stilled on the glass I was washing. I realize I may have been defensive. Money matters can be so stressful, especially for someone your age. The patronizing tone was back, but underneath it was something sharper. Maybe you should consider stepping back from the financial oversight. Focus on enjoying your grandchildren while you. I'm perfectly capable of managing the accounts, Victoria. Course you are. But Daniel's been saying how much you've been struggling lately. The confusion about Emma's party decorations, forgetting our conversations about Mother and Daddy moving in. She was rewriting history, creating a narrative where my protests were actually signs of mental decline. I didn't forget anything, Victoria. You never mentioned. It's okay, she interrupted gently, her voice carrying just enough volume that Daniel, passing through the kitchen for a beer, could hear. Memory issues are completely normal at your age. Nothing to be ashamed of. Daniel paused, looking between us with concern. Mom, if you're having trouble keeping track of things. I'm not having trouble, I said firmly. See. Victoria touched Daniel's arm lightly. She gets defensive when we try to help. I read an article that said, that's completely typical. I realized with growing horror that Victoria was laying groundwork, creating doubt about my mental competency, establishing a pattern of behavior that could be used against me later. She could convince Daniel that I was becoming forgetful, confused, perhaps even senile then. Anything I said about her theft would be dismissed as the ramblings of an elderly woman losing her grip on reality. At night, hidden in my bedroom with the door locked, I spread Victoria's stolen financial documents across my bed and began photographing each page with my phone. If she was planning to discredit me, I needed evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. But as I worked, a chilling thought occurred to me. Victoria wasn't just planning to steal more money. She was planning to steal everything. I discovered Victoria's true plan purely by accident. 3 days after our kitchen conversation, I was running errands when I realized I had forgotten my reading glasses at the office. I drove back to get them, using my key to let myself into the empty building on a Saturday afternoon. When I heard Victoria's voice coming from Daniel's office, speaking in low, urgent tones on the phone, I should have announced my presence. Should have called out a greeting and retrieved my glasses like a normal person. Instead, something in her tone made me freeze just outside the office door. Power of attorney should be straightforward given her obvious mental decline, Victoria was saying. Daniel's already noticed the memory issues, and with her doctor's cooperation, my blood turned to ice. No, the business accounts are the priority. Once I have legal authority over her finances, we can liquidate everything cleanly. A pause, then the house will be more complicated. But if she's declared incompetent, we can force a sale for her own good. Force a sale of my house, my home that Robert built with his own hands. Trust me, it's all perfectly legal. Happens to elderly people all the time when families have to make difficult decisions for their own protection. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid she would hear it. By Christmas, everything will be resolved. Mother and Daddy can move into a place of their own. Daniel will have full control of the construction business, and Ava will be safely settled in assisted living where she belongs. Assisted living. Victoria was planning to have me declared incompetent and locked away in a nursing home while she stole my life's work and sold my home. The beauty of it is that Daniel thinks it's all his idea. He's genuinely concerned about his mother's welfare. Victoria's laugh was soft and cruel. He has no idea that every confused episode has been carefully orchestrated. I thought about the missing coffee mugs, the rearranged kitchen, the constant gaslighting about conversations that never happened. Victoria had been systematically making me question my own memory while building a case for my incompetency. I need another month, maybe 2, to establish the pattern completely. Then we'll have that conversation with her doctor about the stress of managing finances at her. Another pause. Dr. Harrison is very sympathetic to family concerns about elderly patients. Dr. Harrison, my own physician, who had treated me for 30 years and knew my complete medical history, was apparently part of this scheme. Don't worry about the money. Betrayal. By the time anyone thinks to look closely, I'll have legitimate power of attorney and full legal authority to handle all financial transfers. Victoria's voice was confident, satisfied. It's not theft when you have proper documentation. I heard her moving around the office, gathering papers, preparing to leave. Panic flooded through me as I realized I was trapped in the hallway with no way to escape without being seen. I need to go. Daniel's expecting me home soon, and I can't keep being late without raising suspicions. Victoria's voice was getting closer to the door. Just have everything ready on your end. This is our chance to set ourselves up for life. Slip into the supply closet just as Victoria emerged from Daniel's office. Through the crack in the door I watched her lock up and walk toward the exit, humming softly to herself like someone without a care in the world. After her footsteps faded and I heard the building's main door close, I sat in that dark closet for 10 full minutes, trying to process what I had just learned. Victoria wasn't just stealing money from the business. She was orchestrating the complete destruction of my life with my own son's unwitting cooperation and my doctor's professional assistance. By Christmas, I would be in a nursing home, stripped of my assets, my autonomy and my family. Victoria would control everything. The business Robert and I had built, the house we had called home, even my relationship with my grandchildren. And the most diabolical part was that everyone would see it as a sad but necessary decision, made by loving family members who only wanted what was best for poor, confused Eva. When I finally emerged from the supply closet, I wasn't the same woman who had entered it. I had spent months protecting Victoria to preserve family harmony. I had endured humiliation after humiliation rather than expose her crimes and hurt my son. But Victoria had made a fatal miscalculation. She had assumed I would go quietly, that I would accept her version of reality and disappear gracefully into whatever institutional corner she had planned for me. She was about to discover just how wrong she was. Because if Victoria wanted to play chess with my life, I was ready to show her what happens when you underestimate a woman who has absolutely nothing left to lose. The real game was just beginning. I spent Sunday morning at the public library researching financial fraud laws and elder abuse statutes on their computer. Amazing how much you can learn when you're properly motivated. Detective Sarah Chen at the Economic Crimes Division was surprisingly easy to reach on a Monday morning. I had expected bureaucracy and red tape. Instead, I got a competent professional who listened carefully as I explained my situation. Mrs. Henderson, what you're describing is a textbook case of financial exploitation, Detective Chen said. Do you have documentation? Extensive documentation. Bank records, forged contracts, fake invoices, everything. I'd like to see those as soon as possible. Can you come in this afternoon? 3 hours later, I sat in Detective Chen's office, watching her review the evidence I had compiled. Her expression grew increasingly grave as she studied Victoria's handiwork. It is sophisticated, she admitted. Your daughter-in-law has real skill at this. The shell company, the forged signatures, the fake construction project. She's done this before. I'd bet money on it. Nobody starts with fraud this complex. Detective Chen leaned back in her chair. We'll need to verify these documents, interview witnesses, build a solid case. That takes time. How much time? 6 weeks minimum. Possibly longer if she's been careful about covering her tracks. 6 weeks. Victoria's timeline. Had her filing for power of attorney within a month. Detective, she's planning to have me declared incompetent. She has my doctor involved and she's convinced my son that I'm losing my memory. Detective Chen's expression hardened. That changes things. Elder abuse cases get priority, especially when there's active psychological manipulation involved. She picked up her phone. Me make some calls. By Wednesday, Detective Chen had assembled a team that included a financial crime specialist, an elder abuse investigator, and a prosecutor from the district attorney's office who specialized in family fraud cases. The most important addition to our team was someone I had never expected, my own doctor. Dr. Harrison sat across from me in his office Thursday afternoon. His face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Ava, I owe you a tremendous apology. Victoria approached me 6 weeks ago claiming to be concerned about your mental health. She described episodes of confusion, memory loss, difficulty managing your finances, none of which were true. I realize that now. She was very convincing, very concerned, and she had specific examples. Dr. Harrison shook his head ruefully. She played perfectly into my biases about elderly patients and concerned family members. What did she ask you to do? She wanted me to evaluate your cognitive function and potentially recommend a mental health assessment. She suggested that if you were struggling with memory issues, it might be kinder for the family to take over your financial responsibilities. The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Even brought me articles about elderly financial abuse. Dr. Harrison continued, claiming she was worried that someone might be taking advantage of your confusion. The irony is sickening. Will you help us? Absolutely. I've already contacted Detective Chan and provided a statement about Victoria's attempts to manipulate medical professionals. What she did isn't just fraud. It's a violation of the sacred trust between families and their physicians. Friday morning brought the call I had been waiting for. Mrs. Henderson, this is Detective Chen. We're ready to move forward. Can you be available Monday morning around 10 o'clock? For what? To watch your daughter-in-law get arrested. Satisfaction in Detective Chen's voice was unprofessional and absolutely perfect. But first I had one more chest piece to position. That afternoon I called Daniel and asked him to meet me for coffee. Just the two of us away from Victoria's influence and her parents' constant presence in my house. Mom, you sounded strange on the phone. Is everything okay? My son looked genuinely concerned, which made what I was about to do even more difficult. Daniel deserved to hear the truth from me before he heard it from the police. Daniel, I need to tell you something. About Victoria. Something that's going to be very hard to hear. His expression immediately became defensive the way it always did when anyone criticized his wife. Mom, if this is about the house renovations or her parents moving in, Victoria has been stealing from the company large amounts of money over an extended period. Daniel stared at me, like I had spoken in a foreign language. That's impossible. Victoria doesn't even have access to. He stopped. Realization dawning. She handles administrative tasks. But she wouldn't. I have proof. Daniel. Bank records, forged contracts, documentation of nearly $500,000 in theft. The color drained from my son's face. That can't be true. Reached into my purse and pulled out a folder containing copies of the most damning evidence. I wish it weren't. For 20 minutes, Daniel reviewed the paperwork while I watched his world crumble. His wife, the woman he trusted completely, had been systematically destroying the business his father had built. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His voice was barely a whisper. Because I thought I could handle it quietly. I thought I could protect the family. Protect the family. Daniel's anger finally surfaced. She's been stealing from us for over a year. There's more. Daniel. Victoria has been planning to have me declared incompetent so she can gain control of all my assets. Told him about the phone conversation I had overheard, about Victoria's manipulation of Dr. Harrison, about her systematic campaign to make everyone believe I was losing my memory. By the time I finished, Daniel was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The police are going to arrest her Monday morning, I said. Gently. I thought you should know. Daniel looked up at me with eyes full of pain and betrayal. What about Emma and Jake? What happens to them? They'll stay with you. Course you're their father. I don't know how to explain this to them. How do I tell my children that their mother is a criminal? I reached across the table and took his hand. We'll figure it out together as a family. For the first time in months, Daniel squeezed my hand back. Victoria sensed something had changed. Over the weekend, she watched me with increasing suspicion, clearly trying to figure out what was different. I had stopped arguing with her parents' intrusions, stopped protesting when she rearranged my belongings, stopped reacting to her subtle provocations. You seem unusually calm lately, she observed Sunday evening as we cleaned up after dinner. Have you been taking something for your anxiety? I'm just trying to go with the flow, I replied mildly. You were right about picking my battles more carefully. Victoria's smile was sharp with satisfaction. She thought she had finally broken me into submission. So glad to hear that. It's important for elderly people to accept help gracefully rather than fighting every change. Only she knew how gracefully I was about to accept the help of the police department. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one Robert had always said made me look formidable in business meetings. Today felt like the most important meeting of my life. Detective Chan had given me specific instructions. I was to behave normally, follow my usual morning routine and be ready to provide access to Henderson Construction's offices when the arrest team arrived. I was sitting at my kitchen table, pretending to read the newspaper while actually listening for the sound of cars in my driveway when Victoria appeared in her silk robe. You're up early, she said, moving toward the coffee maker with casual grace. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get an early start at the office. Victoria poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter studying my face. You know, Ava, I've been thinking about our conversation last week about you stepping back from the financial responsibilities. Oh, Daniel agrees that it might be best for everyone. Less stress for you, more time to focus on the grandchildren. Victoria's voice was honey sweet, but her eyes were calculating. We could start the transition this week. The transition to Victoria having complete control over the business accounts, she meant. That's very thoughtful, dear. Victoria blinked, clearly surprised by my easy agreement. She had been prepared for an argument, not cooperation. So you're open to the idea. At my age, I should be enjoying retirement, not worrying about quarterly reports. I folded the newspaper with deliberate care. When did you have in mind? Well, if you're sure, we could meet with the accountant tomorrow and begin transferring signatory authority. Tomorrow. Victoria was moving faster than Detective Chen had anticipated. That sounds perfect, I said, standing and reaching for my purse. I should head to the office now. Actually, Ava, why don't you take the day off? Can handle whatever needs to be done. Victoria stepping in to manage the office on the day she expected to gain control of our accounts. How convenient. If you insist, I said agreeably. I'll just run some errands then. I was backing out of the driveway when I saw the unmarked police cars turning onto my street. Perfect timing. I drove to the grocery store and spent 45 minutes shopping for items I didn't need, giving Detective Chan and her team time to work. When my phone finally rang, I was examining tomatoes with the focus of a produce expert. Mrs. Henderson, this is Detective Chen. We have Mrs. Victoria Henderson in custody. 3 simple words that represented justice, vindication, and the end of months of psychological warfare. How did she react? About as you'd expect. She's demanding a lawyer and insisting this is all a misunderstanding caused by your mental confusion. Of course, she was her parents also in custody. Turns out Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell have outstanding warrants in 2 other states for similar fraud schemes. Your daughter-in-law learned from the best. I felt a wild urge to laugh. Victoria's parents weren't innocent victims of their daughter's generosity. They were career criminals who had trained her in the family business. What happens now? Arraignment this afternoon. With the amount of money involved in the elder abuse charges, I doubt she'll be granted. Bill. Detective Chin paused. Mrs. Henderson, you should know that when we searched her belongings, we found documents indicating she was planning to file guardianship papers this week. If I had waited any longer, Victoria would have succeeded in having me declared incompetent and stripped of my legal rights. Thank you, Detective, for everything. Just doing my job. Though I have to say it's nice when the good guys win. I drove home to find my house transformed once again, but this time in a way that filled me with profound relief. Police vehicles were gone, but Daniel's truck sat in the driveway. Through the windows, I could see him moving around inside, probably trying to restore some order after the chaos of the arrests. When I walked through my front door, I found my son sitting at my kitchen table with his head in his hands. Daniel. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Called in. I couldn't face the office today. His voice was hollow. The kids are at school. I didn't know what to tell them. I sat down beside him and waited. He's been lying to me for years, hasn't she? Daniel asked quietly. Not just about the money. Not about everything. Think so. How did I not see it? How did I let her turn me against my own mother? Pain in his voice broke my heart. She's very skilled at manipulation, Daniel. She fooled a lot of people. But I should have seen it. I should have protected you instead of. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Instead of what? Instead of thinking you were becoming a bitter old woman who couldn't accept that things change. Daniel's shame was palpable. She made me believe that your objections were just you being difficult, that your memory problems were making you paranoid. You were being a good husband trying to support your wife. I was being a terrible son. We sat in silence for a moment, processing the magnitude of Victoria's deception and its impact on our family. What happens to Emma and Jake? Daniel asked finally. That depends on what you want to happen. I want to raise them myself here with you if you'll have us. The simple request brought tears to my eyes. My house, which had felt like a prison under Victoria's regime, would become a real home again. Of course I'll have. This is your house too. Daniel managed a weak smile. I think we need to have a long conversation about a lot of things. We have time, I assured him. We have all the time in the world. The house felt different without Victoria's presence, like a held breath finally released. Daniel and I spent Tuesday afternoon removing all traces of her parents' occupation of my bedroom. We donated their abandoned belongings to charity and thoroughly cleaned every surface they had touched. By evening my master suite was mine again. I forgot how peaceful this room could be, I said, standing at the windows that overlooked Robert's garden. I'm sorry we let them take it from you, Daniel said quietly. I'm sorry I let them take anything from you. The children's return from school was the conversation I had been dreading most. Emma and Jake bounded through the front door with their usual after-school energy, calling for their mother. When they found only Daniel and me waiting in the living room, their faces showed immediate confusion. Where's Mom? Emma asked, dropping her backpack by the door. Daniel had rehearsed this moment, but I could see the words still weren't easy. Mom won't be coming home for a while, he said gently, pulling both children close to him on the couch. She made some mistakes with money that weren't legal, and she has to answer for those mistakes. What kind of mistakes? I asked with the direct curiosity of a 7-year-old. She took money that didn't belong to her. Emma at 10 understood the implications more quickly. She stole money. Yes. From who? Daniel glanced at me, and I nodded encouragingly. The children deserved honesty, even if it was painful. From our family business, from Grandma. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a kind of resigned sadness that was heartbreaking to witness in a child. Is that why she was always mean to Grandma? Mean, such a simple word that captured so much truth. Your mother wasn't mean, Daniel said carefully. But she was doing things that hurt Grandma, and that wasn't okay. Where is she now? Jake asked. In jail. The stark honesty of it hung in air. Emma began crying quietly. Not the dramatic sobs of a child, but the restrained tears of someone trying to be brave. Hey, I said, moving to sit beside her on the couch. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. But what if people at school find out? Emma whispered. What if they say mean things about Mom? Then you tell them that your mother made a mistake, but that doesn't change who you are, I said firmly. You and Jake are good, smart, kind children, and nothing your mother did changes that. Will we still live here with you, Grandma? Jake asked. If you want to. This is your home for as long as you need it to be. Over the following days, we began establishing new routines. I drove the children to school in the mornings while Daniel went to the office early to begin the enormous task of untangling Victoria's financial damage. We had family dinners at my kitchen table without the television blaring or adult conversation, dominated by complaints about government assistance and other people's good fortune. The children adapted with remarkable resilience. Emma helped me cook dinner each evening, asking questions about recipes and techniques with genuine interest. Jake discovered Robert's old woodworking tools in the garage and begged me to teach him how to use them safely. Grandma, can I make a birdhouse like Grandpa used to? He asked Thursday evening, his small hands examining a piece of smooth pine. I think Grandpa would love that, I said, remembering Robert's patient instruction of Daniel in that same garage 30 years earlier. But it was Emma's question on Friday morning that showed me how much the children were truly processing. Grandma, were you really getting confused like Mom said? We were making pancakes together and Emma was carefully measuring flour into the mixing bowl with scientific precision. No, sweetheart, I wasn't confused. Her mother was lying about that. Why would she lie? Because she wanted people to think I couldn't take care of myself anymore. That way, she could make decisions about my money and my house without anyone questioning her. Emma considered this while cracking eggs with unusual care. That's really mean. Yes, it was. I'm sorry she was mean to you. The simple apology from my granddaughter hit me harder than months of Victoria's psychological warfare. Children have a clarity about right and wrong that adults often lose in the complexity of relationships and social expectations. Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. Are you glad she's gone? I thought carefully about my answer. Emma loved her mother despite everything, and I didn't want to damage that relationship any more than Victoria's actions already. But I'm glad the lying and the meanness have stopped, I said finally. I'm glad our family can be honest with each other again. Emma nodded solemnly and returned to her egg-cracking duties. That afternoon, while the children were at school and Daniel was at work, Detective Chen called with an update. Victoria Henderson has been indicted on 14 counts of fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. She informed me her parents are facing similar charges, plus the outstanding warrants from other states. Will she go to prison? Almost certainly. The prosecutor is recommending 8 to 12 years given the amount of money involved and the psychological manipulation aspects. 8 to 12 years. Emma would be in college by the time her mother was released. Jake would be graduating high school. How do you feel about that? Detective Chen asked. Relieved, I said honestly. And sad for my grandchildren. That's a normal response. You can feel justice has been served while still grieving what this means for your family. That evening, Daniel came home from work looking more hopeful than he had in days. I met with the insurance company and the bank today, he announced over dinner. We can recover about 60% of what Victoria stole. It's not everything, but it's enough to keep the business stable. What about the house? Emma asked. Victoria said you might have to sell Grandma's house. Daniel looked at me with a question in his eyes. This house isn't going anywhere, I said firmly. This is our family home, and it's staying in the family where it belongs. Relief flooded Emma's face, and Jake actually cheered. Besides, I added with a smile that felt genuinely happy. For the first time in months, somebody needs to teach Jake how to build that birdhouse properly. 2 weeks after Victoria's arrest, I received a call that changed everything I thought I understood about my daughter-in-law's motivations. Mrs. Henderson, this is Agent Patricia Morrison with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you about Victoria Henderson's case. BI. This had escalated far beyond local fraud charges. Agent Morrison met me at a coffee shop downtown, far from Henderson Construction's offices and prying ears. She was a compact woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a direct manner that reminded me of Detective Chen. Mrs. Henderson, Victoria's case isn't isolated. She's part of a much larger criminal network that targets elderly business owners across the country. The words sent a chill through me. A network. Organized financial exploitation schemes. Young women marry into established families, gain access to business assets, and systematically drain them over several years. Agent Morrison opened a tablet and showed me photographs. Victoria isn't even her real name. The woman in the FBI photos looked like my daughter-in-law, but younger with different colored hair and a different last name. Sarah Michelle Collins. She's been doing this for 12 years, Agent Morrison continued. Previous marriages, all to men whose families owned successful businesses. In each case, she manipulated the family dynamics, isolated the business owners from their children, and stole hundreds of thousands of dollars before disappearing. But she didn't disappear this time. No, she made a crucial error. With your family. Agent Morrison pulled up another document on her tablet, a detailed psychological profile that made my skin crawl. Victoria's previous targets were all widowed men with grown children who lived far away. She would marry the target, gradually gain control of his assets, then either wait for him to die naturally or arrange accidents. Arrange accidents. Her second husband died in a suspicious car crash 6 months after signing over power of attorney. Her third husband suffered a fatal fall down the stairs of his own home. Agent Morrison's expression was grim. Both deaths were investigated, but there wasn't enough evidence to prove foul play. The implication hit me like a physical blow. She was planning to kill me. We believe so. The assisted living facility story was probably just a backup plan. Once she had power of attorney, you would have become a liability. I thought about Victoria's careful escalation of her campaign against me, her systematic destruction of my credibility, her timeline of gaining legal control over my assets by Christmas. Why didn't she just continue with her usual pattern? Why target our family when Daniel has children? 'Cause Henderson Construction is worth significantly more than her previous targets. We estimate your family's total assets at nearly $2 million. Agent Morrison closed the tablet. Victoria got greedy. She broke her own pattern because the payoff was too big to resist. What happens now? Victoria's facing federal charges in addition to the state charges. Interstate fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. She's looking at 25 years to life without the possibility of parole. 25 years to life. Victoria would likely die in prison. There's something else, Mrs. Henderson. We need your help. Agent Morrison explained that Victoria was the key to unraveling the entire criminal network. Other families had lost everything to similar schemes, and some had never discovered they were victims of organized crime rather than simple family greed. We'd like you to testify before a grand jury about Victoria's methods. Your case is the most thoroughly documented example we have of how these schemes operate. Course. That evening, I called Daniel to explain what I had learned. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted so long I thought the call had been dropped. Emma's voice came through the phone. Daniel, are you there? I'm here. His voice sounded hollow. I married a serial killer, Mom. You married a woman who lied about everything, including who she is. You couldn't have known. I brought her into our home. I led her around my children. I chose her over my own mother. When she was planning to murder you. The pain in his voice was unbearable. Daniel, listen to me. Victoria fooled federal investigators for 12 years. She fooled 3 other families completely. She fooled police departments and coroners and insurance companies. I took a deep breath. You were a victim too. But Emma and Jake are safe. They're loved. They're going to grow up knowing their real family cares about them more than money or appearances or anything else in the world. When Daniel came home that night, he was carrying a bottle of Robert's favorite whiskey and wearing the expression of a man who had aged several years in one day. How do I explain this to them? He asked, settling into Robert's old chair in the living room. How do I tell my children that their mother is a professional criminal who might have killed their grandmother? You don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Poured us each a small glass of whiskey. They know their mother did something wrong with money. That's enough for now. They're going to have questions as they get older, and we'll answer them honestly, age appropriately when the time comes. I raised my glass to Robert. He would be proud of how we handled. Daniel managed a weak smile. He always said you were tougher than you looked. He had no idea. We drank in companionable silence, listening to the sound of Emma and Jake giggling in their bedrooms as they got ready for bed. Normal sounds, family sounds, safe sounds. "Mom," Daniel said quietly. "Yes. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I chose her lies over your truth. You don't need to apologize anymore, son. Or family. We protect each other. That's what matters now." But even as I spoke the words, I was thinking about Agent Morrison's revelation. Victoria's careful timeline, her systematic approach to isolating me, her plan to gain power of attorney by Christmas. If I hadn't discovered her theft when I did, if I hadn't found the courage to investigate further, if I had accepted her gaslighting about my mental condition, I would be dead by spring. Victoria hadn't just been planning to steal my assets. She had been planning to murder me and make it look like natural causes or an accident. The woman my son had loved, who had lived in my house and eaten at my table and helped my grandchildren with their homework, was a predator who had been calculating the best moment to end my life. That night, lying in my own bed in my own room, I felt something I hadn't experienced during this entire ordeal. Genuine fear. Not fear of Victoria. Would never hurt anyone again, but fear of how close she had come to succeeding. How many other families were out there right now unaware that their loved one's new spouse was actually a professional killer sizing them up for murder? The grand jury testimony took place on a cold morning in November. Exactly 1 month after Victoria's arrest. I wore my navy suit again, my armor for important occasions, and carried a folder containing every document, photograph, and piece of evidence I had compiled. During Victoria's campaign against me, Agent Morrison introduced me to the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet Walsh, who specialized in organized crime cases. "Mrs. Henderson, your testimony is crucial to this case," Janet explained. "Victoria Henderson represents the most sophisticated detailed documentation of her methods will help us protect other families and put away her entire network." The grand jury room was more intimidating than I had expected. 23 strangers who would decide whether Victoria faced federal charges that could keep her in prison for the rest of her life. But as I began speaking, telling the story of Victoria's systematic destruction of my family's trust and security, something remarkable happened. My voice grew stronger, my resolve clearer. Wasn't just testifying about financial fraud. I was speaking for every elderly person who had been dismissed, manipulated, or targeted by someone who saw their accumulated wealth as easy prey. Victoria Henderson didn't just steal money, I said, looking directly at the jury foreman. She stole my identity within my own family. She convinced my son that I was becoming mentally incompetent while secretly planning to murder me once she gained control of my assets. The room was completely silent. She turned my own home into a prison where I was treated as an unwelcome guest. She erased me from family photographs and celebrations. She systematically destroyed my relationship with my son while positioning herself as the devoted daughter-in-law who was generously caring for a difficult elderly relative. I pulled out the folder of evidence, bank records, forged contracts, photographs of my redecorated house, recordings of conversations with Dr. Harrison and Detective Chen. Victoria made one crucial mistake. She underestimated the woman she was trying to destroy. 2 hours later I emerged from the federal building feeling lighter than I had in months. Agent Morrison walked beside me to the parking garage. The grand jury will almost certainly return an indictment, she said. Your testimony was exactly what we needed. What happens to her previous victims? That's the best part. Based on your evidence and Victoria's methods, we're reopening investigations into all the suspicious deaths connected to her previous marriages. If we can prove she murdered those men, their families may finally get justice. Justice. Simple word that represented so much healing. 3 months later, I stood in my kitchen preparing Easter dinner for my family. The real family that had emerged from the wreckage of Victoria's deception. Daniel was teaching Jake how to carve the ham, patiently guiding small hands with a sharp knife while explaining the importance of cutting against the grain. Emma was setting the table with my grandmother's china, the pieces Victoria had tried to replace with sterile modern plates. Grandma, how many people are coming? Emma asked, carefully arranging the silverware. Just us, I said, watching her face light up with satisfaction. Good. Like it better when it's just family. Family. Not the performance of family obligations or the manipulation of family guilt, but the genuine connection between people who chose to love and protect each other. Daniel appeared at my elbow with a glass of wine. The ham's ready. Jake did an excellent job with the carving. He had a good teacher. Learned from the best. Daniel's smile was warm and genuine, free from the tension that had shadowed his face. During his marriage to Victoria, Mom, I have something to tell you. Set down my serving spoon, immediately alert to his serious tone. The insurance settlement came through. Full recovery of the stolen funds, plus damages for the emotional distress Victoria caused. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. This is your share, Daniel. The money belongs to the business. The business belongs to both of us, and after what you went through to save it, you've earned every penny. He pressed the envelope into my hands. Besides, I have plans that require your financial independence. Plans. I want to expand Henderson Construction, open a second location, maybe specialize in custom homes for retirees. Daniel's enthusiasm was infectious. But I need a business partner I can trust completely. Someone with experience, wisdom, and a proven ability to spot trouble before it destroys everything we've worked for.